Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I started my company, TechFlow, about 15 years ago, right out of college. We make business software that helps companies manage their supply chains and logistics. It was just me at first, writing code in my little apartment. But over the years, we've grown into a 500-person company and a leader in our industry. Of course, as the founder and CEO, I'm incredibly proud of how far we've come. But I've tried hard over the years to not let the success go to my head. I don't want to become one of those jerky executives with a massive ego. So I make a real effort to stay grounded and connected to the day-to-day work my employees do. One way I do that is by going undercover every now and then. I'll pick a department, take on a fake name and role, and just embed myself as a regular employee to see what life is like on the front lines. It always provides me with insights into little ways we can improve the employee experience. My most recent undercover mission found me working in our customer support department as Jim, a junior employee who helps respond to technical questions from clients. I took on some training, got assigned a cubicle, and started taking calls and emails just like everyone else. It was great to interact directly with customers and get a refresher on our software from their point of view. After my first few days on the job, I decided to come in late one morning to a scheduled shift. I wanted to see how the department handled tardiness, if policies were applied fairly, and if I received any coaching on it as a new employee. Sure enough, about 20 minutes after I was supposed to start, the supervisor, Karen, came over to my cubicle looking annoyed. She started reprimanding me in front of the whole department about how I needed to take the job more seriously, and that we start work promptly at 9 a.m. I apologized and made up an excuse about traffic, but Karen didn't want to hear it. She loudly announced that she was docking 2 hours of pay from me as a penalty so I would learn my lesson about punctuality. I was completely stunned. Docking pay seemed like an extremely harsh punishment for a minor first offense. But as I glanced around, it was clear none of my fellow employees seemed surprised by Karen's tirade. After she stormed off, I discreetly asked some others if that was normal protocol around here. They told me Karen was known for being a stickler about lateness. She had written up other employees before for coming in just 5 minutes past 9 a.m. and regularly docked people's pay for it. Everyone said her behavior had gotten worse since she was promoted to supervisor last year. The previous manager had been more reasonable, but he retired, and Karen got the job. Her tactics had led to plummeting morale in the department. I realized this was a bigger issue than I thought. The next morning I came in early and asked Karen to meet me in a private conference room. When she arrived, I revealed my true identity as the CEO. You should have seen Karen's face turn white as a ghost. She stammered, trying to explain herself, but I stopped her. I told Karen I had witnessed firsthand how her harsh policies were hurting morale and productivity in the department. I made it clear that I did not tolerate that kind of environment at my company. We needed to empower employees and treat them with dignity while still upholding reasonable standards. Effective immediately, I announced that I was removing Karen from her supervisor position and reassigning her to an individual contributor role. She would no longer have the authority to discipline others. I let her know that I'd be reviewing our policies around lateness and modifying them to be more balanced. Karen was stunned, speechless. I think a big part of her power trip was lording over junior employees who she thought couldn't do anything about it. She certainly never expected the new guy she was berating would turn out to be her ultimate boss. The look of shock and embarrassment on her face was priceless, but I wasn't done yet. I knew Karen's behavior wasn't just harming our own employees. It almost certainly carried over to how she treated customers as well. I made a mental note to audit some of her call recordings too. But for now, I escorted a shell-shocked Karen back to her newly downsized cubicle. As we walked past her former direct reports, I announced the change in her role. The team literally cheered and applauded. I spent the next hour meeting with the group, getting their anonymous input on changes they'd like to see in the department. They opened up about several issues that I promised to address. Over the next few weeks, we overhauled our policies around schedules, breaks, paid time off, and performance management. I brought in Patricia, one of the department's friendlier and more respected agents, to take over as supervisor. She worked closely with me and the team to create a motivating, supportive environment. Productivity and satisfaction scores increased dramatically. And we even received positive feedback from customers who said our service had improved. As for Karen, let's just say her attitude adjustment was still a work in progress. But she remained in her individual contributor role with no direct reports. The lesson I learned is that I can't take our culture for granted. Even after 15 years of trying to lead by example, there will always be Karens who slip through the cracks. It's crucial that I stay plugged into the day-to-day experience of all employees, so I can step in when necessary and reinforce our values. My undercover missions remind me to never get complacent, and to remember that the health of our culture ultimately depends on how we treat each other as human beings. That starts from the top down, so the buck stops with me. I'll do whatever it takes to keep us true to the supportive, empowering company I always aim to build. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This is the story of Mike. Mike managed the warehouse of a hospital. The said hospital was built in the 50s in the center of the town. The stadium is on one side, the justice hall is on another, and schools are on a third side. There is also a caserne and 2 other medical buildings around. So the streets are crowded with cars searching for parking. One day, when opening the gate of the landing dock, Mike noticed a little car parked in the hospital's internal court, near the 2000L liquid oxygen tank, that model of tank. Of course, it is absolutely forbidden because this is private property. The court has been planned before the 35T truck was the norm, and maneuvering is already difficult. Liquid oxygen is explosive. A car or a truck hitting the tank would be a major hazard. It was a small Italian car with no advertisement, but it was the kind commonly used as a second car or to travel in the Dolomite Mountains where the roads are very narrow. So Mike made some calls. The car is not owned by anyone in the warehouse or the nursing staff. No doctor has such a small car. The reception made public announcements asking visitors to move the badly parked car to no avail. By 6 p.m., the car is gone. Okay, problem solved. The day after, the car is still there. Same calls with the same result. Mike called the police, but the police cannot tow it because it is a private place, and the towing company won't do it without a police query. By chance, that day, only lorries came to unload medical materials. When it is time to close the warehouse, the car is gone once more. On the 3rd day, when the landing dock opens, the car is already there. And now it's a real problem. A 35T truck from Germany must come this day. There is no way it can reach the dock without tilting the car and the liquid oxygen tank. It has become a clear and present security problem. All the warehouse team exchanged ideas on what to do, but all feasible solutions have already been tried. It is when someone from the maintenance team passed on a forklift with a pallet of plaster bags. It struck everybody at the same time. There is no way the Italian car could weigh more than 1 ton of plaster. So Mike goes to see the forklift driver while the team searches for a wood pallet. Slowly, with many precautions, the forklift slides the pallet under the car, lifts the whole thing, and goes to drop the car off the nearby street. In the first 10 minutes, the police are warned that a car is parked in the middle of the street, blocking the traffic. The said car is towed away in less than half an hour. The truck has no problem maneuvering. 2 days later, rumors run through the hospital. It was the car of the director's wife. She worked in a medical building a few streets away. While everybody found that Mike made a good move, they wait to see what will follow. It is now a global management problem. Mike is called to the director's office. As soon as he passes the door, he starts to explain. Yes, I know it is your wife's car, but... The director says, What? No, I called you for an entirely different matter. I warned my wife several times. She had it coming, that idiot. Until the hospital closed 20 years later, the story was repeated to each new worker and each medical student. Put your car on a tree if you want, but don't park in the landing dock court because Mike will make it disappear. The next one is a petty revenge story. About a year ago, I was at a lake way north from where I live. I returned to the parking lot to find my car blocked in by someone who thought it was a brilliant idea to leave their car directly behind 3 parked cars. I was the middle car, I definitely couldn't get out. I waited, and just before I was going to call a tow truck, a couple walked up and casually got in the car, proceeding to drive off. I quickly backed up, circled around the other way to reach the parking lot exit first. I reached the exit and he was right behind me. I threw the car in park and just sat there. 10 seconds later, he was laying on the horn. Eventually, he got out and walked up to my window, yelling profanities and telling me to get out of the way. Something to note here is that there is only one exit in this parking lot, and the entrance, for some reason, has one-way spikes to prevent people from leaving that way. I have no idea why, considering this is just the parking lot for a lake. Anyway, I cut him off and told him he had made me wait 17 minutes and 20 seconds. I timed it, when he illegally blocked me in, and I intended to wait 17 minutes and 20 seconds to let him leave. He stormed off, called me a few names in the process, and floored it in reverse. He drove down to the entrance and, without noticing the spikes, I guess, drove right into them. I saw his brake lights come on at the last minute and both front tires were done. I then decided that 17 minutes was a waste of time since he'd clearly be there longer than that, so I left. It made the rest of my day feel much better. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So this is my favorite story of malicious compliance from my own workplace. I was working in fast food at the time, overnights under the Golden Arches, and I had been working there for about 9 months at that time. I'd started talking to someone who used to work there as a manager after this person quit. This person decided to come back a few months later, but by that time we were engaging in a sexual relationship. Fast forward 6 months, and this manager and I had been on and off a few times, but this person was a manager on my shift the entire time. I had never notified the company of our on-off relationship to begin with, assuming this person did so upon hiring and that the company didn't need constant notification of our on-off status. At this point, though, 6 months later, my hours disappeared. I thought it was an accident on the schedule at first, and my main manager would authorize me to clock on anyways. I was a good employee, and they needed the body. The worst part about my schedule was 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. on the only 2 days I had left available. This meant I had no way to get home. I ride the bus. And I couldn't legally be scheduled outside of my availability in the first place. It's Oregon. They can ask you to prove your availability, but they can't schedule you outside of it unless you have already failed to prove it. Eventually, managers from other shifts began telling my managers and me that it was because of the said relationship. My shift's managers were also told that any manager would be written up if they authorized me to clock on when I wasn't scheduled. When I texted my GM about it, I was sent the relationship policy. While it did include that management needed to be notified, it also stated that new hires were responsible for notifying management of all relationships, not pre-existing staff members. At this point, I was pretty straightforward in stating that we were in a sexual relationship when they were hired. If my hours were not reinstated, I would apply for underemployment and report them for harassment. I also threw my manager under the bus here, saying they should be the one in trouble, not me, because I was a bit irritated they hadn't notified the company upon rehiring. The GM told me a meeting would need to be scheduled with the regional manager, but made no attempts, from my perspective, to make that happen. The GM also offered to switch me to days for less pay or to another store with the same pay cut. I denied this because I would quit before working days in fast food again, or taking a pay cut because someone else didn't do their job. My hours didn't come back the following week either. I believe the main overnight manager was on vacation that week. So cue malicious compliance. I worked the hours I was scheduled, and not a minute more. They called me twice that week, asking me to come in and help with cleaning. I said no, I don't want to get anyone in trouble for working unauthorized hours. The GM had to come in at 3 a.m. and do my usual deep cleaning tasks because nobody there knew how. I didn't hear another word about it, but my hours were back and within my availability again the next week. I quit, and so did my managers about 3 months later, but it felt nice to get this win. The next one is an entitled people story. I live next to a couple in their 50s. The husband has dementia, and it's truly unfortunate to see him going through that. But here's where things go awry. His wife, my neighbor, constantly lets him wander around unattended, often in my yard. Yesterday, I discovered him climbing onto my shed in the backyard. Concerned for his safety, I immediately called my neighbor to come get him. She arrived but did nothing, just stood there watching as her husband then jumped off the shed and hurt his leg. I thought she'd be grateful that I'd looked out for him, but instead she called the police, alleging that it was my fault he got hurt because it happened in my yard. She was yelling and making a huge scene, saying I should have done more to prevent the accident. The officers were quite understanding once I explained the situation, and they saw my surveillance footage. They agreed it wasn't my responsibility to supervise her husband, especially when she lets him wander without any oversight. However, the nerve of this woman. She had the audacity to blame me for an incident she could have easily prevented by just properly caring for her husband. The entitlement is simply mind-blowing. Now, I'm left wondering if I should install a fence or what measures I need to take to protect myself legally, because this is beyond ridiculous. Any advice would be appreciated. The next one is an entitled parent story. Hi, I am a 29-year-old female and I am pregnant with our first child with our due date fast approaching. My husband is very excited, but his mother is really starting to push boundaries as we get closer to the little one's arrival. A bit of backstory. My husband and I have been married for 2 years, but we started trying for a baby 3 years ago. It was a long journey with infertility. I was at the doctor's nearly every month getting blood work done and undergoing different hormonal therapies. We suffered 3 miscarriages, including one on our wedding day. As time went by and we weren't successful, my mother-in-law grew more and more impatient and disappointed. She would never badger my husband, but she would badger me about the treatments and why they weren't working. To say the least, it was stressful. It got to the point that the doctor figured our only chance was IVF. And my husband and I had to make a decision because we didn't have the funding for such a treatment. So we decided to call it quits and accept that we were most likely going to have a child-free life. When I informed my mother-in-law about our decision, she just stared at me with a look of pure disappointment and wouldn't talk to me. To say that she made me feel even more of a failure would be an understatement. Then, by happy chance, we got pregnant completely naturally. Of course, I wanted to keep it a secret for as long as possible due to our past miscarriages, but it was hard to do because I got really sick. I was so sick I went days without food and was still vomiting. When we eventually did tell the family, my mother-in-law was over the moon to say the least. I was 4 months along at the time, and she started rubbing my belly and insisting that it needs to be a boy because the family needs a boy to carry on the family name. As my pregnancy progressed, my sickness did not go away and my appetite did not return. So, to say that I was having a hard time and not enjoying my pregnancy would be an understatement. I was barely 6 months along when my mother-in-law started insisting that I would forget all about it and be ready to have another one before I knew it. Our first child has yet to arrive, and she is already insisting on baby number 2. As my due date started to draw near, my anxiety began to grow as my mother-in-law began to make insane demands. She lives 4 hours away from us, for a good reason, and she started making plans that we are to come visit near the end of September. The baby may only be 1 week old by then if I go past my due date, so that the family can meet the baby, and she can hold and feed the baby as much as she wants while I get some rest. I am not okay with this. First off, it's my baby, and I am not comfortable handing them around to a whole bunch of people before they are even 1 month old. Second, I am the only one who can feed my baby in the early stages unless my midwife or doctor states that they need to go on formula. Third, I don't want to travel and be put on display when I am freshly postpartum. I have talked to my husband extensively about this, and he is of the stance that we will wait and see when the baby actually arrives and how the birth goes. Because we wouldn't commit to my mother-in-law's plans, she informed my husband that she was going to come and stay with us around the due date. He shut this down real quick because he doesn't want to play host to anyone at that time, and neither do I. So now she is very unhappy. I have also told my husband that there will be no video calls while we are in the hospital. Everyone will receive the same birth announcement text, and they can wait until we are ready for them to visit the baby once we are home. Needless to say, my mother-in-law is not happy with this arrangement, and I am terrified that she is just going to show up and expect to be the first to hold the baby when they arrive. Also, she learned the gender when my husband accidentally let it slip that we are having a girl. Well, she was disappointed, but immediately started pushing pink at me. I turned her down because I like gender-neutral colors, and the nursery is woodland animal themed. She told me that we are going to have a major problem with the fact that I don't like pink, and don't want to dress her in frilly, uncomfortable dresses. My kid is going to be in onesies and sleepers for as long as possible because they are comfy, and I don't have to stress about them getting ruined due to the fact that a baby and messes go hand in hand. All of her actions and pushing of her own agenda have made me feel like I really need to keep my guard up around her and my baby. I feel like she's going to try to undermine me at every turn and do what she wants despite what I say. I also have a recurring nightmare of her just taking my baby while I am sleeping, under the line of "I was just helping." I have tried making my husband aware of my fears, but he thinks I am being slightly dramatic, and that she won't disrespect me as a mother in such a way. But I am really unsure. Am I really overreacting, or are my fears justified? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.